Hello, my beautiful people. Uranus is the planet of the new, the thrilling, and the avant-garde, even the strange. It has a weird and wonderful, shocking, electric, rebellious kind of energy. It rules things like shock, sudden changes, rapid endings, divorce, even is a Uranian element, and rupture. Anywhere that we kind of see things really being pulled apart in order to be put back together in a better way. It really favors decentralized systems, right, over top-down hierarchies. And if Saturn represents structure, then Uranus definitely represents disruption. With that said, welcome. I am Raphael. So if you are new to my channel, my name is Raphael. I am an astrologer, tarot reader, numerologist, and energy worker. For those of you that would like to know, if you are a continued subby, you know Rafi loves you, and thank you for being a part of the Radiant Nation. So we are here to talk about what is a monumental and very often for a lot of people a once in a lifetime transit. Now, the reason I say that is because it takes Uranus 84 years to travel the zodiac, right? And given that that's pretty much the majority of a human lifespan these days, it kind of figures, right? You only get one transit through each sign over the course of a lifetime. Now, with that said, on the 7th of July, we are going to have Uranus move into the sign of Gemini, right? For the first time in 84 years. So for a lot of us, this is the first and the last that we're going to see of this. But on July the 7th, it comes in. It's going to spend about 2.5 to 3 months-ish in that sign. Then it's going to reverse back into the sign of Taurus, finish up whatever business it has in that sign. And then in April of 2026, it comes into the sign of Gemini once more for good for the next 6.5 to 7 years, give or take, right? So it's a pretty big deal. This is one of the outer planets. It's also known as a transpersonal planet. So it really does pack a punch. And given everything that Uranus stands for and its symbolism, I think this is definitely one that we can pay attention to. Now, when I'm not sure, some of you will remember this, some of you won't. I did a Round the Zodiac project about 2.5, 3 years ago now, where I went through each one of the signs and I looked at all various different aspects of what that sign and planets in that sign, etc. I made a prediction on there that I'm very interested to see if it will play out over the next 6 or 7 years. So let's get into it and continue with the overview, and then you're going to get a separate video for each and every sign. This is what I did with the last transit of Uranus in Taurus. There's a playlist for those on the channel. I'll put a link for it in the description box below. And what I did there was go through the astrology of it, but then I also pulled cards for each one of the years that this would spend in the new sign. So if you want to check that out, as I say, you can see the Uranus in Taurus playlist, and stay tuned as the rest of them, or should I say, as the sign videos for Uranus in Gemini are released. So let's get straight back to it. Let's be clear about this, right? Uranus doesn't break things for the sake of chaos. It may feel like that in the moment. We're talking about Uranus energy, for me, is very much the Tower card in tarot. It really has a very similar energy to it. It only really disrupts what isn't solid enough to really withstand the evolution. It really is going to be, and really is, should I say, the planet of awakening through disturbance. And sometimes that looks like anarchy. Sometimes it looks like innovation. Sometimes it looks like both. Uranus governs the unexpected flash, the quantum leap, the unthinkable, the suddenly made real. In a lot of ways, it's said that Uranus is the higher octave of Mercury, right? And it kind of figures. So I think that's a very interesting way to see it. And it makes sense, right? We've got this very technological slant when we're talking about Uranus. We're talking about what's new, what's avant-garde, what is not necessarily implemented or accepted by society yet, because it's an emerging element that's a little bit weird and wonderful or a bit strange. It's the modern ruler of Aquarius, right? And as an Aquarius, I can definitely tell you we are considered the aliens of the zodiac. This is the domain of Uranus's domain is really the domain of ideas that move at the speed of light, of telepathy, of electric charge, and wild thought forms. It's the energy of the invisible matrix, right? When you think about electricity, we know it's there because it's powering everything that we use nowadays, but it's invisible, right? We can't see it per se. Now, when I talk about the invisible matrix, I'm not talking about the movie kind, although Right. But the kind that flickers between like different dimensions, here one moment, gone the next. And it's very much when you think about how Mercury moves, the Quicksilver god, Hermes, the messenger of the gods, and then you think about how the internet and the Wi-Fi and all of that kind of stuff was once considered very Aquarian, but it's now considered very Geminian, right? Why? Because it's gone from being something that's very new and out there and different to something that we actually use on a day-to-day basis, right? And Gemini is more the day-to-day. Aquarius is definitely more about the future. These two energies definitely have an overlap, but that doesn't mean that it's going to be all smooth sailing. Now, many astrologers call Uranus, as I've said earlier, the higher octave of Mercury, and I definitely agree because when you think about how thought moves, it's there one minute and it's gone the next, right? When Mercury now rules our phones, our socials, laptops, tablets, Uranus governs what comes next. Well, artificial intelligence is definitely a Uranian thing. Emerging technologies, that's definitely a Uranian thing. Biohacking, this idea that you can tap into your body's mechanisms in various different ways in order to enhance your responses and also your longevity, space travel, right? Quantum computing, neural links, whatever your thoughts are about that, put them in the comments. I'm not mentioning this because I think it's a good idea. If you've been with me long enough, you know I've already said you'll be putting a chip in my body over my dead body. You may reanimate what's there, but once my soul has left. But outside of that, no, I don't think I'll be letting anybody put any chips in me. No, thank you. All right. Things that feel like magic to the primitive mind. Now, I say that, and you think, right, new technology, emerging ideas, etc., to the primitive mind of our ancestors. Were they primitive? Right? What advanced science actually looked like to them was actually magic, right? So when you think how advanced we think we are in this day and age, imagine what's going to be coming forward that really kind of makes us go, like, we look at everything that we have in the world at this moment in time. It's pretty freaking awesome, right? So for us at this advanced stage of humanity to be looking at things like, whoa, that be magic, okay? Right? Just think of the kinds of things that we might be seeing over the course of the next 6.5, 7 years. This is a mind planet and it mirrors the nature of thought itself. It's instantaneous, it's untouchable, and it's also constantly shifting. Gemini in itself is a very nervous kind of energy. It does everything with ambidextrous, sort of rigorous zeal, right? Usually Geminis have two phones, right? They do things with two hands. They'll talk about this, they'll talk about that. They're kind of here one minute and gone the next. So the sign is fast, the planet is even faster, right? So these are things to consider. Like speech, Uranian energy lives in vibration. Once spoken, a word changes everything around it, and yet it's gone as if it never existed, right? Think about that for a moment. How we speak things. And I mean, you can see this, right? Have a really deep conversation with a friend, and how you walk away from that conversation and unless you record it, nobody, and there were several witnesses to said conversation, nobody would ever know that that conversation had taken place. And yet you're so deeply moved by it. Think about that for a moment. So we ask, do words make, we've got that saying as like, if a tree falls in the woods, does anyone hear it? Or does it make a sound, right? Well, we ask the question, do words make sound if there's no one there to hear them? Which really leads me on to a bit of a tangent that I want to go on. I have this, and I have since I did that project of the around the zodiac, and I started looking at what Uranus in Gemini could represent and what it could be. And my imagination and my intuition and my feeling around this. And I don't say this to be over the top or sensational. I say it probably because I'm an Aquarius. And probably because I believe in the human potential, right? I think we've only just scratched the surface. This is one of the other reasons that I'm really not interested in putting chips in humans. I think we, as a human species, have things in our DNA that we don't understand anymore that are probably, that probably mimic things like what we would consider supernatural powers or abilities. Um, and I want to touch on this for two reasons. One, I do have this sneaking suspicion that telepathy, the ability to intuit things on a more profound or deeper level, is likely to be something that unfolds. I do have a really strong sense around that. And things like energy work. Well, the human body is made up of how much bioelectricity? Like just anyway, in that year around the Zodiac project a few years ago, I kind of made that prediction that I think we are going to see something more alike telepathy, where human beings are able to communicate in other ways. That may also, because remember, Gemini is communication as well. It's a very communicative energy. I wonder if we see new languages start to emerge. I think we'll definitely see new and faster social media platforms, etc. So watch out to the oligarchs. I think there's going to be some competition in the next 6 to 7 years. What I would also say as well is I just recently saw a video with Steve Judd. Shout out to Steve Judd, by the way. I absolutely love him. I think he's a brilliant astrologer and he's actually just a really nice human being. But in that, he said he wonders if Uranus moving into Gemini is going to open up new neural pathways. And really and truthfully, science has already told us we only use 10% of our brains, right? We don't really know what happens with the other 90%. Imagine unlocking that, what would be possible? So I have this sneaking suspicion that, yeah, this is probably going to come with some of that. So I'm going to give you some Uranus quick facts here. So the planet Uranus was discovered on March the 13th, 1781 by William Herschel. If you actually look at one of the original glyphs for the planet Uranus, it was said to have his initial in it, right? Is the H. It was discovered by him using a telescope, the first planet discovered this way, right? So when you think about that, it's got that sort of new technology, new idea. The orbital period, which I've talked about, is 84 years it takes to go round the sun. That's 7 years per sign, which is one of the reasons that Uranus has also been called the human planet, which is very interesting. In terms of its retrogradation, it does spend about 5 months-ish, 150 to 155 days, give or take, of the year retrograde, right? So it's not, do you know what I mean? Like, so when you think about that, it's kind of okay, so big cycles, long periods of time. And in terms of the current position, as I'm talking about this now, as I'm recording this, Uranus is still in Taurus. It's at that 29th degree. But that's because today is the 24th of June. On July the 7th, 2025, it's going to move into the sign of Gemini, which I mentioned earlier, and then re-enter in April of 2026 for well, certainly for the next 6.5-ish, 7 years, right? So the effect of Uranus in Gemini. Well, Uranus rules things like nerve impulses and the electrical systems in the body. So while Gemini is the original sign of the mind, it's where the moon finds her exaltation. Why does the moon find her exaltation in Gemini slash the third house? They're not the same thing. Houses and signs are different things, but I'm using this as like a broader point to illustrate. Well, the moon, who governs the body and the mind, thrives in a fast-moving, connective territory, right? And Gemini is definitely that, right? The Gemini energy loves to connect people, to communicate, to interact. And the moon craves that, needs that. So that, even though the moon is exalted in the sign of Taurus, She's exalted in the third house. And when you think about what the third house represents, it does have an overlap, but it's not the same thing as Gemini. Now, the mind is constantly shifting, responding, adapting, and so is Gemini, right? And Luna, our fair celestial mother, she craves connection. She needs to interact, to reflect, to exchange. That's why the void of course moon, when she makes no aspects before changing signs, feels so off, right? It's not just the silence, it's the disconnection. And the moon does not like to be alone, right? It's not a planet that's meant to be alone or a luminary. Even a challenging aspect is better than none, right? Especially when you're looking at things like electional astrology, horary astrology. If you were born with a void of course moon, I know a couple of people that have been born with void of course moons, and it's a really interesting phenomena what happens around those people. Um, Totally trippy, but also really kind of cool. Now, if Uranus governs the nervous system, the electric synapses and the sparks that make us alive, right? It's alive. Um, oh, yeah, something just occurred to me. Then this transit absolutely suggests an upgrade to the human nervous system itself. Now, I believe that in the background, while Uranus has been moving through the sign of Aries, the sign of the self, through the sign of Taurus, the sign of the body, right, and the environment, I think we've been seeing this or feeling this for quite some time. And I really truthfully believe that this actually started when Uranus moved through Aquarius, right? The way that we process thought, emotion, stimulus is all about to change. And I really feel that the reason, especially with Neptune now in the sign of Aries, if you haven't seen the Universal 9 year video that I put out, there's a link for that in the description box below. I go into a lot of detail there about what I think Neptune's transit of Aries is really going to do for us. I think these two things are working in tandem, and I believe that what is going to happen as a result of this is as our nervous systems become more sensitive, more refined, and able to process information that much faster, as Neptune really brings the high vibrational, intuitive energies online, I think we start to move into a time where it's really hard to lie, right? Where it's really hard for people not to know what other people are thinking or feeling. And I wonder if this really enables us to communicate in ways that are a lot more deeply empathetic and also potentially faster, right? What happens when you can, I mean, we've got these nowadays, right? But what happens when you don't need to pick up a phone and you can literally send a thought or, like just really interesting stuff. Anyway, change is the game of Uranus, right? So sometimes it elevates us by creating disruption and restructuring and eventually correcting itself. So I've got a few examples for you here. Uranus in Aries, 2010 to 2018, gave rise to platforms like Instagram, a flash fire of like selfhood, identity, visuals, the instant gratification. And now we're seeing the burnout and the collapse because that's kind of followed that, right? When you think about that, it allowed people to really put themselves front and center. Look at what is created. Now we have people talking about, like, don't believe everything that you see on Instagram. That's just a snapshot of all of the perfect moments of someone's life, right? Which is a lot of the truth. There are very few people who post what they really look like when they wake up in the morning, how they really feel every single day, what, their four walls look like versus that incredible holiday that they saved for 2.5 years to go on, right? There's pictures of and posts out there as well of, like, those amazing Instagram type photos, and then they're like, this is the photo that everybody comes to take, and then they take a picture behind them and there's like a line of people waiting to do the same thing. Do you see what I mean? Uranus in Taurus, 2018 to 2025, amplified the collective voice. Taurus rules the throat, and Venus obviously rules Taurus. And then what happened? Through tech, we shared more thoughts, more voices, more raw presence than ever before. We've seen technology being implemented more in terms of food. We've seen what Heather from Astrology, shout out to Heather from Astrology with Heather. She calls them Franken foods, right? These new things that they're creating technologically that are meant to be good for us to eat. Not so sure about that. Everyone suddenly had a microphone, right? So this is the other part of it. But the in terms of the food, look at the disruptions to the supply lines that we had, especially during COVID. Now, as Uranus enters the sign of Gemini, we're moving from speaking to thinking and from thinking to transmitting. And I kind of have this really strong feeling that this might be where the telepathic era really begins, right? I'm not saying we're suddenly all going to be telepathic overnight. I'm saying that I think this may be the moment that this starts to really switch on, not as science fiction, but as a biological reality, right? When you think about energy, when you think about Reiki, when you think about all of these things, your thoughts really are just another form of energy. They're another form of information. They're another thought form of energy. And, who's to say that you can't project these things? How do we think, prophetic dreams work? And I don't care whether anybody believes me or not. My entire family, certainly on my mum's side anyway, are known for prophetic dreams, right? My granddad had it, my mum has it, I have it, my sister has it. And when I say like, and I'm not talking about like one or a few around the big major disasters that have happened. I'm talking small, random details right the way to through to global things. We have dreamt things for years, as long as I can remember. We've always had conversations about dreams, what they could mean, and had literally had ones that have played out. So I know that to be a very real phenomena. What happens when everybody has that though? Right? I'm really excited by this prospect. Our nervous systems have been evolving, getting ready for this. Some will develop enhanced psychic sensitivity. I genuinely believe that. Others might form new neural pathways, as Steve Judd said. Shout out to Steve Judd. We may start seeing the early stages of real, trackable mental upgrades, right? The processing of information, the communications. I can definitely say that we're having, some of the kids being born nowadays, their intelligence is it's kind of scary, right? And yes, some people will choose to integrate technology directly into their bodies, even their minds. Personally, that seems really cool as a theory, but no, thank you. Beyond that, Uranus in Gemini is potentially going to revolutionize how we connect physically, mentally, and globally. If we think it's all high, fast paced now, think high speed intercity travel, right? Green, accessible flights that are faster and cheaper that take us from literally one end of the globe. By the time we get to the end of this Uranus transit, long distance travel will be like, it'll be a blip, personally, I feel. Massive shifts in public transportation, especially in short journeys, how we get along, how we get around, a complete rethinking of movement and speed and access. I do wonder if under this transit they crack the maglev problem, so the magnetic not the quantum locking, right? So the problem that they have with that is it creates incredible speed, but they need to keep the magnets incredibly cool in order for it to work sort of as a thing. This is why the Hyperloop stalled because it was just taking too long for them to figure out how it works. I wonder if under this transit they figure that out. Now, I don't love the idea of the 15-minute cities. It's very dystopian when it's, in the way that it could be misused. It feels very Hunger Games, not interested. Cool movie, but no thank you for the real life. But I do believe in local empowerment, right? And when we think about Uranus energy, this idea of shocking divorce, disruption, destabilization, the way that I see this kind of happening is it tends to pull things apart that are obsolete or that are not working. So, this idea that one person, one figurehead governs an entire country, that might be gotten rid of, right? That might be phased out. And where we start to see, like in the States, And I know this happens to a degree now already, but it may get to a point where it's like, they don't have that overall sort of top-down government structure. It's just that literally each state is its own sort of sovereign province, I guess. So another way that this could also show up as well is in a future where communities govern themselves more directly, we might see a rise in neighbor-to-neighbor care, localized, tech-enhanced, self-sustaining systems where people help the people, not just corporations dictating terms and getting fat off of everybody else. Um, Now I paint that picture as opposed to the dystopian 15-minute city, but it's, really worth considering that that is also a possibility, right? We're going to see when we think about what Uranus does and what it represents, disruption, destabilization, right? It's going to pull things apart first so that we can rebuild them better. By the time Uranus leaves Gemini in 2033, how we move, how we speak, how we travel, how we think, how we connect will potentially be unrecognizable from where we are today. And I think a part of the reason for that is as a society, we have built a very mercurial and very Saturnian kind of world. Shout out to my Astro Papa, Frank Clifford. He always says that the world that we live in is both very mercurial and Saturnian in various different ways. And with the fact that both of these planets are moving into different signs within, months of each other, it's kind of telling, right? And big planets that are moving, when I say mercurial, I'm obviously referring to the Geminian energy, but you get my point, right? And I mean, I have to say, I'll be watching for every detail because I'm fascinated by this, just to see what's likely to unfold. In order for something new to come in, something old has to be destroyed, or does it? Look, we all know that things aren't working the way that they are, that the systems are bloated, that they're glitching, right? This is kind of like in the Hunger Games where the lights flicker because the force field is taking up so much energy. Breaking at the seams, right? That's where the world is at this moment in time. Things can't happen, they can't continue as they are. Uranus doesn't fix what's broken, it literally overwrites it. It will dismantle, it will get rid of what's outdated. Not with, and not out of malice or spite, but actually out of necessity. In the X-Men films, in the very original X-Men film, actually, it was in the second one, Professor X says, evolution took us from a single-celled organism right up to what we see today. And he said, but every so often, evolution leaps forward. I kind of feel like this might be one of those moments. And again, it's not always going to be an easy process to unfold. Change is the currency of this transit, and Uranus rules change. But change isn't stable. It doesn't hold your hand, right? It rattles, it pulls up the floorboards. And if you want the renovation, you better get comfortable with the mess. Good Lord. Right, I totally understand this at the moment. I have only just started the process of renovating my beloved home, but I tell you, it's disruptive as feck, right? I can't wait for the moment where I can just sit back and go, oh, look, doesn't it all look lovely? Expect disruption, expect movement. How much it sweeps you up depends on how well you can adapt to the changes that are coming. And they are coming, right? So, and this is one thing, like I've had so many conversations about AI. I get where people are coming from with the environmental part. That really sucks, and I really hope that over the next 6 to 7 years we can figure out how to make this happen without being so detrimental to our mother, right? Because ultimately we've only got one Earth. So that part of it is obviously very important. However, I'm gonna tell you straight up, AI is here to stay. It is going to be integrated into every facet of life moving forward. Get comfortable with it, or you're going to get really overrun very, very quickly, right? I say this, and it's not to say that I don't care about your feelings. I care more about you than how you feel, right? Get out of your feelings because this is coming and it's going to be a big part of life, how we move forward. If you don't want to get left behind and left into obscurity and potentially even shut out of various different things, you need to get on board with this. I'm not saying now, you all know I'm a nature baby, right? As you see me, if there's a patch of grass, these socks are coming off, boy. I don't care if you want to see my feet or not, right? I am a nature lover, a nature baby. I love the natural world. Flora and fauna have and always will have my heart and captivate me 100%. That being said, I'm also a very realist human being to understand, okay, these changes are happening and I need to understand how to integrate them into my life, my work, my business, my existence, not just for me, but for those people that I love as well. It's not going anywhere. Get comfortable with it quickly. In terms of energy, electricity, and environmental shocks, we're seeing when something flowing gets disrupted, it has no choice but to shift direction. And I think we're going to see major upheavals in power grids. I think we're going to see big changes in how we distribute electricity, fuel, and energy resources. I think there will be new fuel sources or new ways to use them that are coming up. We can't keep consuming the way that we are. That it's just a fact, right? We already know this, not without serious consequences for the planet and obviously ourselves as a result of that. In terms of money, markets, and mutable mayhem, well, Mercury rules Gemini, and Mercury isn't just the messenger, he's also the money god, right? When we think about transactions, when we think about commerce, when we think about trade, when we think about things moving backwards and forwards, whether that's money, whether it's crypto, whether it's bartering, whatever the case might be, those are all very Mercurial slash Gemini and things. Things are going to get weird, right? Expect disruptions to how we use, how we move, and how we exchange money. Those things are going to shift a lot, right? New currencies, definitely a crypto boom is on its way in, as well as a crypto bust. So please be careful, learn, listen, grow your knowledge around what you're doing with these things. Don't just jump in blindly and don't believe 90% of the people on YouTube that talk about crypto. They're really not in it to help people besides themselves. And I have it on good authority that about 95% of those people have lost more money than they've made. All right. So if you're going to follow people on that, do your homework on the human person behind the information. More real-time trading and way more transparency. Remember, doesn't like this top-down government thing. It wants unilateral systems where everybody is on the same level, right? So I think we're going to see more transparency. We, the people, will demand more transparency. Think, obviously, Gemini is mutable. It likes to have options, and Uranus is going to deliver them here in this sign. Now, when we're talking about the media breakup, Gemini is the sign of the media, right? It's definitely the sign of newspapers and news outlets, etc. Uranus wants the truth. It's not interested in lies or fantasy or illusion. Neptune is the illusion planet, is the fantasy planet. Uranus is the reality planet. Yes, Saturn is the reality check, but that's in a different way. Uranus is really about the truth and potentially the shocking truth. We may have a lot more things revealed to us over the next 6, 7 years about how the world really is run, about the people that really run the world, all of that kind of stuff. We're already seeing some really interesting things. Well, not interesting, but shocking by other people's standards. Um, I don't want to go too deep into it, but I am going to say a lot of what has unfolded. I remember having a conversation with a really good friend of mine, and I was having conversations about this as early as 2012, 2013. And at the time when I was talking about these things, a lot of people were like, okay, we think Raf's gone off the deep end with the conspiracy theories. Out of all the people I know, only two people apologized to me. And one of them was my really good friend. She didn't apologize. She just said, "Yeah, I actually remember now you talking about all of this stuff, and now to see and hear about it on the news and whatnot is actually really like, you know." Now, that being said, new media platforms rise up, a push away from those massive conglomerates, this idea of one or a few people controlling everything, that idea is going away, right? Uranus and Gemini is not going to stand for that because it's Gemini is what we is in older astrological terms, it's called a common sign, right? Anything that's common cannot have an element of being, or something up above being regal or elite controlling that. It's just not possible. More independent voices sharing direct, unfiltered views. Fuck yes. All right, less screening as well, right? Uh, screening meaning control. Also, if you think the internet and stuff is fast now, I mean, I think over the next 6, 7 years, what we think is fast now, we're going to be like, damn, like when you think about once upon a time, we used dial-up modem. Shout out to people that, had a heart attack every time their parents picked up the phone while they were on the internet. If you're that old, give me a little shout out. But think about that, right? At that time, we thought that was fast. Now look at what it is. It's crazy. Like even the most basic of smartphones can do more than any PC could do up to and including the year 2000, which is insane, right? A bunch of apps will launch and a load of them will die just as fast. Only the ones that are offering something different, something honest, something real, and something truly accessible are going to be the ones that survive, right? Gemini is data, Uranus is shock. Together, they're going to create a storm of innovation and also potentially release secrets around God knows what, right? The things that come to life at this moment in time will come to light, both light and life, I guess, will be yeah, hang on to your hats. All right. Cloud life, AR, and digital expansion. Cloud storage is going to become the norm, right? That's where we're going to have things. Digital real estate is going to become real estate. If you're not already getting on this now, start doing it ASAP. Augmented reality steps to fully sort of bring that into the mainstream. So, augmented reality is, where you have those glasses and then you put them on, and like then you can see a certain thing in the corner, or those, where you can be playing on your computer or watching a film or whatever, and also looking around you, all of that stuff. Augmented reality is another one that's coming, I think. Whole new worlds built on code emerge, right? So there's a game called Second Life that's huge for this kind of thing. I personally never really got into it. I played around with it. I thought it was kind of cool as a concept, but I think there'll definitely be more of that. Attention and data are already a currency that's going to intensify, right? The more you can hold on to and capture people's attention, and also their data, things are going to just really go even more so in that direction. Education gets a reboot. This one's big, right? Because Gemini is school, specifically early learning and information. Uranus is evolution through disruption. So, what happens? Kids learning specialized fields much earlier. I think we're going to see curriculums built around the aptitude instead of outdated standards. So, it's not like 12 years of fucking random general shit that you literally never use. It could be that, by the time you're, let's say, 8 years old, you have tests done, like you take aptitude tests to say, like, you know what, you would be absolutely brilliant as working in agriculture, or you would be fantastic as an accountant or working with numbers, or you show aptitude for engineering. I do wonder if over the next 6, 7 years we start to move towards that, which I think is a brilliant thing because, and I've always had this belief that if all education was free, I mean, like higher education and stuff, yes, there would be some pockets of subjects that were, saturated a little bit more than others for sure. But for the most part, when you talk to people and you understand how many people there are in the world and how different all the people in the world are, even with their similarities of race and age and sex and background and sexuality and all of that stuff, even when you factor that in, the diversity in the human race tends towards people wanting to do very different things. And I think if all of education, certainly higher education for, later young people or adults even, if we were all given chances to retrain, you'd see people naturally go into the fields of farming. People would naturally want to go and become tree surgeons. People would naturally want to go and become mathematicians because everybody has their interests, right? And if we've got aptitude tests that really help us figure out what we're good at to start with, like me, I have a high level of apophenia. I can draw connections where none seemingly exist, right? I also have a very high emotional intelligence. My EQ is, even if I do say so myself, but my EQ is very high. If I had been given an aptitude test for those things at, let's say, 5, 6 years of age, my career path would, do you know what I mean? Like, would have just gone in a certain direction. Um, Education that is personal, flexible, and radically different. Imagine being able to study, not because, like nowadays you get a Bachelor of Arts degree, right? Which is about as close as you get to it. But what if it were more personal? What if it were based on the things that you actually do really, really well that can help you become the best version of yourself and therefore more productive and more positive and more useful to society? Rise of coding, tech trades, engineers. We need builders now, right? This new world that's coming in that's going to be super technologically advanced and all the rest of it. We need people to build that. So working with your hands, working, those blue collar, things and engineers and tech trades and all the rest of it, those are absolutely directions for you to go in now. If you're a young person and you're trying to figure out, or you've got kids and you're trying to figure out, what direction to send them in, think about some of this stuff. Local and small, maybe even ungoverned schools show up. And when I say ungoverned, I don't mean lawless or, anarchistic or whatever. I just mean, not so heavy on the indoctrination. What comes to mind is Pink Floyd's "Hey, teacher, leave those kids alone." Yeah, you kind of get where I'm going with that. Anywho, home study will absolutely increase, especially with work from home. One thing I'm going to tell you straight away, this idea that work from home is going away, it's not going to happen. I'll eat my hat, right? Yes, do I think some companies are forcing it and all the rest of it? They are, but it's not going anywhere at any time soon. And if that increases, I think home study will increase as well. It may get to the point where you don't even go to school, you just stay at home and you do your classes and all the rest of it there. Not saying it's a better way to do it, because obviously we need the social element, being at school and surrounded by other people. It's good for your immune system, it's good for your mental health, it's good for your social skills, etc. Paper might fade out, right? Pens might become a vintage thing. Learning is going digital and fast, and we can kind of already see that, right? Jupiter and Gemini did that the most of the work in that regard. Transport and travel rewired. Gemini also rules cars, transport, and movement, or third house is transportation, local area, etc. But there's an overlap. Remember what I said? There's an overlap that, but they're not the same thing. So yeah, self-driving cars is going to be the absolute norm. You'll book one, it will pick you up, it will drop you off, and it will move on to its next job. I don't think it will be, a thing. Might get to the point where most people don't really own cars because they don't need to. Trains will probably go overhead or even deeper underground. I'm going deeper underground. I don't know if you remember that song by Jamiroquai. Used to love him. Maglev trains and the Hyperloop. I have faith in this. I don't know why, but I just really love the idea of this project because of what it could do and how much kinder it is to the planet. Short haul flights get faster, cheaper, and greener. I know EasyJet have got those standing flights now where it's like you just get on it and it's kind of it's just like being on a tube or a subway. We won't move the same by the time Uranus leaves Gemini for sure, not even close. Health, healing, and the rise of the mind-body tech connection. In terms of health, this could get really, really interesting, right? For a few reasons. And it feels like we're going to shift from a system that's based on cure to one that finally values prevention, right? And there's a growing collective hunger for alternative therapies that actually support the body rather than just manage symptoms. But these modalities, they're not going to stay in their current form. So they'll likely go through a metamorphosis of some sort. They'll still be rooted in energy, emotion, intuition, but now they're going to be supercharged by tech. AI support was going to start to is going to start showing up in unexpected ways, enhancing the accuracy, improving diagnostics, and helping practitioners deliver insanely accurate and tailored and bespoke results, right? I'm kind of seeing this as if you know anything about the Marvel films, you know, Iron Man, Tony Stark builds all his own tech, and he's got all these little gadgets that he's built that literally help him build whatever it is that he's trying to build, because obviously he's just one human man. But he's got all of this technology that helps him. Expect to see more personalized treatment plans, custom diets, tailored movement routines, things that are actually targeted to you and your body, all through filtered through your body's real-time data. So it's like AI doesn't replace the human, it actually sharpens the work. So I'll give you an example. Imagine you go to an acupuncturist who has a full sort of inside look at your nervous system, where certain things actually are in your body rather than where they, you know, that you think they might be and all the rest of it. What happens when you can take that data and build your treatment plan based on somebody's actual real-time data of the body? It's just like the prospects of this, my mind just goes, oh, this is amazing. All right. And because Gemini rules communication and interaction, talking therapies are going to boom, but I also think that they're going to evolve. Even that will evolve, right? Yes, we're going to start understanding the mind-body connection in a way that we haven't before. Therapies that blend conversation, interaction, human interaction, or talking about, or the sensation, or even the vibration of what's going on with a client will start to be the norm, right? We have conversations around things where we're taking into consideration how someone thinks, how someone feels, what occurs to them at the very moment that they start talking about this thing or the counselor says this to them, right? We're going to start to really approach things in weird and wonderful and new and different ways. We're also going to need to talk about the nervous system. Gemini ruling the nerves, Uranus ruling the electrifying everything that it touches. We could see a big rise in sensory overload, especially as we get acquainted with these new upgrades that are taking place. Neurodivergent expression, we're already seeing that. I think it's just going to become more. A growing awareness of nervous system regulation, which has already started. So, those people that are talking about this stuff, that are talking about these ideas already, they're ahead of the curve, but that's definitely the way that things are going. Regulating your nervous system could become as common or as vital as brushing your teeth. Breath work, cold plunges, somatic tools, these won't be fringe anymore. They'll be standard, like they'll be just very normal things. And then there's the tech. We're talking about AI health advisors, apps that track your emotional patterns and reveal how you're actually feeling about things, wearables that give you nutrition prompts to say, like, you know what, like, imagine if your watch says to you, not only are you dehydrated, but actually your B3 is really down at this moment in time. Can you eat some of this, and maybe go and do that, right? What about those breathing cues or mental resets in real time? Even diagnostics that might outperform human doctors in certain areas. All of these things are absolutely possible, and I wonder if they unfold over this next 6 to 7 years. Remote healthcare is absolutely going to get smarter, faster, and more accessible. I think there's going to be a lot of that going forward. And the best part, it won't just be medical, it will be holistic. They're going to start to really factor in people's bodies, how they think, how they feel, what their nutrition is like, what their sleeping is like, their uh what was I saying? Their body, their mind, and whatever machines surround them, they don't necessarily have to be in you to enhance your life, right? Yeah, I worry about that aspect of this. And as I said, no, thank you. I'm not here for it. Even if they came to me tomorrow and said, Raf, we can give you any superpower that you want, which, if anyone knows me, I'm a total Marvel geek. No, thank you. I don't want or need a chip or any circuitry in here, right? Unless it's a pacemaker that I absolutely have to have, I'm really not interested. Last thoughts before your sign readings come in. So consider all of this stuff, right? But here's what I want you to hold in your mind before we dive into, or before the sign videos come out. Right now, Saturn and Neptune are both in Aries. For the first 3 years of this, Uranus in Gemini, the Uranus in Gemini transit, Uranus is going to form a sextile to both Neptune and Saturn. That's huge, right? It's huge for so many different reasons. And I think what this is really going to provide us with is an ability to take the best of what is offered. Because remember, a sextile is only ever an opportunity. You have to do something with it. So there is an opportunity, a window, a moment for real potential if you're willing to do something with it, if you're willing to work with what is available. This is a rare chance for us to build something new together, right? As a collective, as the world. And this starts with us taking back our personal power, understanding who we are, where we are sovereign beings, and then considering how, when we come together and work as a collective, even if that's a smaller collective, we do it together, we move forward. I don't think this is an era of the lone wolf. I think we're going to start talking more about what we want, what we need, and how to create futures that actually work, that are actually feasible for where we're going. And it's not just about dissolving the identity. I think it's about understanding that your personal brilliance gets to shine as a part of something bigger, right? Think movement, not martyrdom. Gemini is the air, Aries is the fire. Both of these are fast. And together they create momentum, right? This first 3 years of this Uranus transit, they're going to move quickly, right? It's going to be really, really fast. There's going to be a lot of change, and it may feel like, okay, we're heading for a disruption. But after that, Saturn shifts into Taurus, and while Uranus and Neptune will continue to hum in the background, it won't have the same blast of ignition. Some other things to consider are the Uranus Saturn sextile. This sextile is really going to be about harmonizing chaos and control, right? So Uranus Saturn structure meets revolution, right? But this is a harmonious aspect. But again, it's just an opportunity. So think about where these areas of your chart are, and it's going to show you where structure and revolution are really trying to harmonize themselves. It's about harmonizing the chaos of life and the control that needs to be executed at any given moment. Uranus wants revolution. Saturn wants results, and together we get new systems that actually hold up. This is where the new models get built, right? It's the old systems crumbling, but with purpose. The world starts to reshape from the inside out. It's not going to be easy, but I think it's definitely going to be important. Uranus, Neptune, right? This is really interesting. What about technology, spirit, and the ghost in the machine? This one's more subtle, but it's just as big, right? Uranus, Neptune will reshape how we connect spiritually, the conversations around technology, the soul, the nature of reality, the simulation and simulation in general will absolutely dominate. The idea of a ghost in the machine will stop being a metaphor and will lead to really real debated terms like can a machine carry emotion? What does AI feel, if anything? Can you program empathy? There'll be a big push towards spiritualizing our tech or maybe finding ways to integrate these two things. And just as big just as big a pushback on these things, right? And just as big because when we realize that maybe we're going too far with something, there may be an element of that because when connection gets replaced with simulation, something vital really goes missing. And that's the pendulum swing, right? That I think we're going to see over this time. And one thing that I have noticed about Uranus energy is it pulls things apart, makes them better, and then it starts to do the same thing again, but potentially a bit too early or maybe where, things need course correcting because it's like in order to gain a momentum and for something to be solid, Uranus energy needs to kind of not be there, right? So it's kind of like Uranus then tries to disrupt whatever it's built because it's like, well, yeah, okay, we built this, but that's new. And it's like it doesn't give a thought to the fact that actually what we've built is new, but it's also working. But to Uranus energy, it's like, well, no, this is old now because this was something new, however long ago. AI bypassing and the rise of simulated spirituality. This is one that I've been thinking about a lot. And with Neptune sextile to Uranus, I think we'll see an explosion in AI psychics, algorithmic tarot readers, emotion sensing apps, virtual support or virtual spiritual mentors. And at first, it might seem magical, maybe it even seems helpful, but there'll definitely be a moment, maybe several, where people realize, like, wait, this isn't soul. This is simulation dressed as guidance, right? And that's when the real conversation actually begins. Tech enhanced doesn't mean truth connected, right? Let me say that again. Tech enhanced doesn't mean truth connected. And the difference, will matter more than ever. And I say that because no matter what we can build, no matter how advanced whatever we build is, you'll never be able to give that thing true empathic ability or intuition. No matter how good you get at calculating the odds, that's not going to give you what we know to be instinct. What about storytelling, cinema, and myth making? Well, Gemini loves narrative, Neptune dissolves boundaries, and you put these two things together, they'll light a fire under music and movies and media, and potentially even how we retell the stories of the myths. Expect to see films that push the limits of reality and human identity, stories about blurring of body and machine, right? Maybe even love between man and machine or, woman and machine or whatever the case might be. Art that explores connection, alienation, and what is the nature of too far. This might be an era of myth remade through screens and soundtracks that are like a full sensory mirror held up to the collective evolution in some way. Um, what about the oops factor and the planetary repair, right? So, this really reminds me of something else, and that was back in the 80s. You probably remember we had a big global panic about CFCs and the ozone layer, and maybe that was a real issue, but I've always wondered if there was more to it. So, between CERN and a few other experiments that no one likes to talk too much about, it's possible that something else happened. And I wonder if they figured out, you know what, if we cut out CFCs, this is going to help that, right? So I'll give you an example. Look at how quickly the waterways of Venice cleared up, and look at how quickly the animals started to come back into the urban areas once everything was shut down and the lockdowns happened, right? That's a very natural, very normal thing. And I wonder if the reason they banned those CFCs was for them to say, like, if we ban these for the next 10, 15 years, that really awful hole in the ozone layer that we burnt in it because we were fiddling about with things that we don't really understand will probably close somewhat, right? Now, don't get me started on all of that because I'll go off the deep end, but maybe it was a cleanup. Maybe it was a course correction. Either way, obviously it worked. It had to have done because we're still here, right? Maybe it had to happen to undo something else. And I do wonder if this is a possibility with that. No proof. Just a gut feeling. Bottom line, the Uranus, Neptune, Saturn combo could really push us forward in ways that we can't even imagine yet. It won't always be graceful. It might not even feel good at times, but it will be progress in some regard. This is the kind of progress that lets us level up as a species, the kind that reminds us that you don't need to do it all alone, but you do need to stay awake during the process so that if it goes off course, you can pull it back. Um, that being said, stay tuned while we get to the 12 signs. Obviously, you will have your own video. There'll be the astrological breakdown, there'll be the Taroic breakdown. So check that out. And yeah, thank you for making it this far. Let me know in the comments what you think, what you feel, what makes you really excited, what sort of scares you, what makes you think, like, oh, I'm not sure if I like that idea. Give me all the things in the comments below. Don't forget to join my mailing list so that you can get up to date. Obviously, I'm going to be talking about this all the way through. So if you want to find out what I'm saying about it in other ways that you won't see online, let me know and sign up. All right. With that said, take care and stay tuned for your personal Uranus in Gemini transit video.